intent of this video is not to be political. The only place wars belong is in DCS and in history.
There's a thing to cut.
Echo sheet. Dog 1, south 100, elevation 050.
Whether you're fans of Nicolas Cage movies, historian buffs, or served in the military, you would have heard of the Code Talkers. These were the members of the Navajo Nation who joined the Allied forces along with the United States Marine Corps and became the human encryption decryption specialists that were never hacked or broken by the enemy. Expanding from the experience during World War I, the United States Marine Corps in World War II brought on about 400 Navajos to participate as code talkers, communicating in their language and using additional code words to send messages, directions, and instructions, thereby saving lives and guaranteeing success in the Pacific for the United States and the United States Marine Corps. Special terms were used by the Navajo to communicate top secret information.
I served during World War II as a Navajo code talker with the United States Marine Corps. When we got in the military, we had to talk about reconnaissance plane. Well, it flies at night, it is quiet, doesn't carry any armament, and we said, well, that's a hummingbird. So in Navajo, it was dakitien, and that's hummingbird in the Navajo language.
Unlike the Nazi Enigma machine, which relied on mechanical methods to encrypt messages, the Navajo codes were never broken by the Japanese. Japanese and English are very different languages, and you still had to use encryption. This is not the case with Russian and Ukrainian. Despite what you might have been told, Ukrainian people speak and understand Russian very well, especially those in the military forces. As a matter of fact, we've seen many interviews with pilots, infantrymen, and leadership who speak fluent Russian, including Mr. Zelensky. There are 5 or 6 key factors making things even more difficult. These include the advanced Western decryption capability, the proliferation of Soviet hardware to the West and all over the world, the equipment shortages plaguing the Russians, as well as engaging in close-range trench warfare, and the opposing forces have rapidly redeployable MLRS and artillery units. Let's look into this closer. Unlike any other war in recent history, Ukraine has really benefited from the advanced Western radio decryption and technology capabilities. You can decode Russian messages faster using the advanced computing power of Western technology. This is because the West has had lots of time to study Soviet equipment, but also Ukrainians may be using the exact same radio sets as the Russian army because there's so much Soviet equipment which hasn't been replaced. And unfortunately, that equipment which hasn't been replaced is being supplanted by off-the-shelf equipment. Walkie-talkies, made in China, made in Taiwan. There is no encryption on those devices, so you can eavesdrop on them very easily. And this is another issue. On top of that, there is tight and close combat trench warfare, where communication is essential, where your radio can be intercepted very quickly. And then we're talking about those walkie-talkies here, because if you're having long-range communication, maybe harder to intercept, maybe not, but here those walkie-talkies can be easily intercepted. Finally, highly mobile artillery units such as the MLRS can move quickly out of the way if somebody overhears that they're about to be hit. All these things put together, the Russian army found their own code talkers. They didn't have to go far, only about 5,000 miles east towards Mongolia, towards the region known as the Altai. The Altai region borders Mongolia, China, and Kazakhstan, surrounded by mountains, and is largely rural. The population is similar to Kazakh, Mongolians, or the Chinese, but have a unique culture. The population is low, mainly nomadic. The area has low GDP, and there are some cities, but most of the population do live in rural regions. But there are many, many language dialects. And because of low GDP, the Altai members of the Russian forces and those from Buryatia all suffer higher casualties than any other part of Russia. So what do these code talkers do? Their job is to provide a number of factors, such as the ability to provide targeting for MLRS and artillery units. This is done by providing reporting on what is seen between artillery units and the forward observers. Also, if you are having a drone or another method of surveillance, you can then correct the fire or direct the fire. So if you're sitting in a trench and you overhear that there's going to be an artillery strike on the trench next to a bridge over the hill, you might realize you are the one being targeted. But if you overhear the Altai language or one of its dialects, you'll have no idea. In addition, drone operators will often have a code talker with them who can transmit details that are seen on the drone screens back to the main forces over radio. Why? Well, because drones only have a range of 6 to 10 kilometers, and we're talking about those small portable ones. This means that you'll have to rely on verbal communication to provide directions, locations, and troop capabilities as you're doing a recon. In the urban storming environments, and we're not talking about the weather, we're talking about the urban close combat scenarios. The code talkers are being deployed with troops in order to call in airstrikes. Another example, you're about to take on a fortified position in a high-rise building. You need to be able to call in an airstrike on the building, report its position, and call it in. If your opponents are listening to the same frequency or can decode your message, they may vacate that building, making your airstrike a waste. Well, in this case, it can be transmitted over the radio in one of the Altai dialects, and then on the other side, it can be decoded. And of course, there's other communication activities. Currently, this is the reason and the Russian method of using their code talkers in the war in Ukraine. For those of you watching this video, hopefully you've enjoyed it. Let me know in comments if you want to see more. I believe in peace, and this war should end as soon as possible. Plazma 1945 out.